Good evening, and welcome to Footnotes and Folly. I am Professor Reginald St. John Pemberton, and tonight we open the ninth and last book of Herodotus of Halicarnassus, the book the ancients called Calliope. We carry on in plain modern English, from the first line, with nothing left out, still using Macaulay's public domain translation. The plain rendering and the muttering are my own. This is part 48. With the spring, Mardonius marches down and takes the abandoned city of Athens a second time, and burns what is left of it. But this year the Greeks come out in force. The largest army they ever put into the field gathers under the Spartan Pausanias, and moves north into Boeotia, until the two great hosts stand facing each other across a river near the little town of Plataea, where the war on land will at last be settled. Let us begin.
After Alexander returned and reported to Mardonius what the Athenians had said, Mardonius set out from Thessaly and began leading his army toward Athens with all possible speed. Wherever he came, he took the people of that land along with him. Meanwhile, the leaders of Thessaly did not regret anything they had already done. On the contrary, they urged the Persian on even more strongly. Thorax of Larissa, who had helped escort Xerxes in his flight, now openly offered Mardonius a passage through the country for the invasion of Hellas. When the army, in the course of its march, reached Boeotia, the Thebans tried to keep Mardonius there. They told him that no region was more convenient for him to encamp in than Boeotia, and they urged him not to advance any farther, but to settle there and try to bring all Hellas under his power without a battle. They said that to defeat the Hellenes by open force when they were united as they had been before was a hard task even for the whole world joined together. But if you do what we advise, you will gain control of all their plans of resistance with little effort. Send money to the men who have power in their cities. By sending it, you will divide Hellas into two parties. After that, with the help of the party that is on your side, you will easily subdue those who are not inclined toward you. This was their advice, but Mardonius did not follow it. A strong desire had taken hold of him to capture Athens a second time. Partly this came from obstinacy, and partly from his intention to signal to the king at Sardis, by beacon fires across the islands, that Athens was in his possession. Yet when he reached Attica, he did not find the Athenians there even then. He learned that most of them were either in Salamis or on board the ships, and he took the city because he found it deserted. The earlier capture of the city by the king had taken place 10 months before this later expedition of Mardonius against it. When Mardonius came to Athens, he sent Morikides, a man of the Hellespont, to Salamis with the same proposals that Alexander the Macedonian had previously brought to the Athenians. He sent these offers a second time because, although he already knew the Athenians were not friendly to him, he hoped they would give way and abandon their stubbornness now that the land of Attica had been taken by the enemy and was in his power. For this reason he sent Morikides to Salamis. Morikides appeared before the council and reported the words of Mardonius. Then one of the councillors, Lycidas, gave his opinion that it would be better to accept the proposal Morikides brought and refer it to the assembly of the people. Whether Lycidas said this because he had received money from Mardonius, or because he truly thought so himself, he did express that opinion. But the Athenians, both those in the council and those outside, were immediately furious when they heard it. They gathered around Lycidas and stoned him to death. Morikides the Hellespontian, however, they dismissed unharmed. Then, when a great uproar arose in Salamis over Lycidas, the women of the Athenians heard what had happened. One woman passed the news to another, and each took another with her, until they went of their own accord to the house of Lycidas and stoned his wife and children to death. The Athenians had crossed over to Salamis in this way. As long as they expected an army from the Peloponnese to come and help them, they remained in Attica. But when those in Peloponnesus acted very slowly and with much delay, while the invader was already said to be in Boeotia, the Athenians removed everything to safety and crossed over to Salamis themselves. At the same time they sent envoys to Lacedaemon to reproach the Lacedaemonians for having allowed the barbarian to invade Attica, and for not having gone with them into Boeotia to meet him. They also told the envoys to remind the Lacedaemonians how many things the Persian had promised to give the Athenians if they changed sides, and to warn them that, if they did not help the Athenians would find some shelter for themselves. The Athenians sent us to say that the king of the Medes not only offers to give us back our land, but also wishes to make us his allies on fair and equal terms, without deceit or treachery. He also wishes to give us another land in addition to our own, whichever land we ourselves choose. Yet we, out of respect for Zeus of the Hellenes, and because we scorned betraying Hellas, did not agree to this. We refused, even though the other Hellenes dealt unjustly with us and left us to destruction, and even though we knew it was more profitable to make a treaty with the Persian than to continue the war. Nor shall we make such a treaty in the future if we have our own will. In this way our duty toward the Hellenes has been sincerely done. But as for you, after you were once in great fear that we might make a treaty with the Persian, as soon as you learned with certainty what our spirit was, namely that we would never betray Hellas, and because your wall across the isthmus is almost finished, you now take no account of the Athenians. After agreeing with us to come to Boeotia to oppose the Persian, you have now deserted us, and you have allowed the barbarian besides to invade Attica. For the present then the Athenians are angry with you, because you did not do what was fitting. And now they bid you send out an army with us as quickly as possible, so that we may receive the barbarian in the land of Attica. Since we failed to meet him in Boeotia, the most suitable place to fight in our land is the Thracian plain. During this time the Lacedaemonians were keeping a festival and celebrating the Hyacinthia. They considered it of the greatest importance to provide for the things that concern the god. At the same time, the wall they had been building at the isthmus was just then being completed with battlements. The Athenian envoys came to Lacedaemon, bringing with them envoys from Megara and Plataea, and spoke before the Ephors. When the Ephors heard them, they put off their answer until the next day, and on the next day they put it off again until the day after. They continued doing this for 10 days, delaying the matter from day to day, while during that same time the whole body of the Peloponnesians was building the wall across the isthmus with great diligence and was very close to finishing it. I cannot say why, when Alexander the Macedonian came to Athens, the Lacedaemonians were so anxious that the Athenians might take the side of the Medes, while now they had no concern about it, unless it was because their wall across the isthmus had by this time been built, and they thought they had no more need of the Athenians. When Alexander came to Attica, the wall had not yet been completed, and they were still working on it in great fear of the Persians. At last, however, the answer was given, and the Spartans set out in the following way. On the day before the envoys were to have their last hearing, Chilios, a man of Tegea who had more influence in Lacedaemon than any other foreigner, heard from the Ephors everything the Athenians were saying. This, Ephors, is how the matter stands. If the Athenians are not friendly with us, but are allies of the barbarian, then even if a strong wall has been built across the isthmus, a wide door has been opened for the Persian into Peloponnesus. Listen to their request before the Athenians decide on something else that will lead to the fall of Hellas. This was the counsel he gave them, and they immediately took his words to heart. Without saying anything to the envoys who had come from the cities, they sent out 5,000 Spartans while it was still night, assigning no fewer than 7 helots to attend each man, and appointing Pausanias the son of Cleombrotus to lead them. The command properly belonged to Plastarchus the son of Leonidas, but he was still a boy, and Pausanias was his guardian and cousin. Cleombrotus, the father of Pausanias and son of Anaxandrides, was no longer alive. After he had led home from the isthmus the army that had built the wall, he died not long afterward. The reason Cleombrotus had led the army home from the isthmus was this: while he was offering sacrifice for battle against the Persian, the sun was darkened in the heavens. Pausanias chose as a commander alongside himself Euryanax, the son of Dorios, a man of the same house. So Pausanias had gone out from Sparta with his army. When day came, the envoys, knowing nothing about this departure, came before the Ephors intending also to depart, each to his own state. You Lacedaemonians, remain here celebrating this Hyacinthia and amusing yourselves, while you have left your allies to destruction. The Athenians, wronged by you and lacking allies, will make peace with the Persians on whatever terms they can. Once we have made peace, it is clear that we become allies of the king, and therefore we shall join him in expeditions against any land to which the Persians may lead us. Then you will learn what the result of this matter will be for you. When the envoys said this, the Ephors answered and confirmed it with an oath that they supposed the men were by that time already at Orstheon, on their way against the strangers, for they used to call the barbarians strangers. The envoys, not knowing anything about the matter, asked what these words meant, and by asking they learned the whole truth. They were struck with amazement, and set out in pursuit as quickly as possible. Along with them, 5,000 picked hoplites of the Lacedaemonian dwellers in the country round did the same. They were hurrying toward the isthmus. As soon as the Argives heard that Pausanias and his army had gone out from Sparta, they sent as a herald to Attica the best long-distance runner they could find. They did this because they had previously undertaken, of their own accord, to promise Mardonius that they would stop the Spartans from going out. When the herald came to Athens, he spoke to Mardonius. Mardonius, the Argives sent me to tell you that the young men have gone out from Lacedaemon, and that the Argives are not able to stop them from going out. Therefore may it be your fortune to take good measures concerning this. After saying this, the herald departed and went back. When Mardonius heard the message, he was no longer at all eager to remain in Attica. Before he received this news he had been waiting because he wished to learn what the Athenians were going to do. He had not been harming or laying waste the land of Attica, because he kept hoping that they would make a treaty with him. But since he had not persuaded them, and now that he had been informed of everything, he began to withdraw from the country before the force of Pausanias reached the isthmus. First, however, he set fire to Athens and threw down and destroyed whatever remained standing of the walls, houses, or temples. He marched away for this reason: first, because Attica was not a land where horsemen could operate freely, and also because, if he were defeated in a battle in Attica, there would be no route of retreat except through a narrow pass, where a few men could stop them. He intended, therefore, to retreat to Thebes and fight near a friendly city, and in a country where horsemen could operate freely. Mardonius, then, was withdrawing out of the way, and when he was already on the road, a message came to him saying that another body of troops in advance of the rest had come to Megara, consisting of 1,000 Lacedaemonians. When he learned this, he considered the matter and desired, if possible, to capture these men first. So he turned back and began leading his army toward Megara. The cavalry went ahead of the rest and overran the Megaran land. This was the farthest land in Europe toward the setting sun that this Persian army reached. After this, a message came to Mardonius that the Hellenes had assembled at the isthmus. He therefore marched back by way of Plataea, because the chiefs of Boeotia had sent for those of the Aesopians who lived near the line of march, and these men guided him along the road to Sphendolis and from there to Tanagra. After encamping for the night at Tanagra, he directed his march the next day to Skolos, and so he was within the land of the Thebans. Then he began cutting down the trees in the territory of the Thebans, although they were on the side of the Medes. He did this not because he was moved by any hostility toward them, but because urgent need forced him both to make a defense for his camp and to prepare a refuge, in case the battle did not turn out for him as he wished. The camp of his army stretched from Erythrae along by Hyce and reached the river Sopos. The wall he was building, however, did not extend so far as all this. Each face of it measured somewhere about 10 furlongs. While the barbarians were busy with this work, Tegeans the son of Finan, a Theban, made splendid preparations and invited Mardonius himself and 50 of the most distinguished Persians to a feast. Those who were invited came, and the dinner was held at Thebes. What follows I heard from Thersander, an Orchomenian and a man of very high reputation in Orchomenos. Thersander said that he too had been invited by Tegeans to this dinner, and that 50 Thebans had also been invited. Their host did not place the guests, so that each nation reclined separately by itself. Instead, a Persian and a Theban were placed on every couch. When dinner was over, as they were drinking pledges to one another, the Persian who shared a couch with Thersander spoke to him in the Hellenic tongue and asked him what place he came from. Thersander answered that he was from Orchomenos. Since you have now become my table companion, and have shared my libation, I wish to leave with you a memorial of my opinion, so that you too may know beforehand and be able to take whatever counsel for yourself may be profitable. Do you see these Persians who are feasting here, and the army we left behind encamped by the river? Of all these, when a little time has passed, you will see only very few still alive. As the Persian said this, according to Thersander, he shed many tears. Thersander was amazed at his words and told him that surely it was right to tell Mardonius and those Persians who were held in honor after him. Friend, what is destined to come from God cannot be turned aside by a man. No one is willing to follow counsel, even when someone speaks what is reasonable. Many of us Persians know well the things I am saying, yet we go along with the rest, because we are bound by necessity. This is the most hateful grief of all human griefs, to know the truth, but to have no power over what happens. These things I heard from Thersander of Orchomenos, and he also said that he told them at once to various people before the battle at Plataea took place. While Mardonius was encamped in Boeotia, the rest of the Hellenes who lived in those regions and took the side of the Medes were all supplying troops and had joined in the invasion of Attica. Phocians alone had not joined in the invasion. I say the Phocians, for they too were now actively taking the side of the Medes, not willingly, however, but under compulsion. Not many days after Mardonius arrived at Thebes, 1,000 hoplites of the Phocians came, and their leader was Harmachides, the man of highest repute among their citizens. When these men also came to Thebes, Mardonius sent horsemen and ordered the Phocians to take up their position by themselves in the plain. After they had done so, the whole cavalry immediately appeared. Then a rumor went through the army of Hellenes that was with the Medes that the cavalry was about to shoot the Phocians down with javelins, and the same report spread among the Phocians themselves. Their commander Harmachides then exhorted them. He told them that it was clear these men meant to hand them over to a death they could plainly foresee, because, as he guessed, the Thessalians had falsely accused them. Therefore, he said, every one of them ought to prove himself a good man, since it was better to bring their lives to an end by doing deeds of courage and defending themselves than to be destroyed by dishonorable death while offering themselves for slaughter. Let each of the enemy learn, he said, that they were barbarians, and that those against whom they had plotted murder were Hellenes. While Harmachides was exhorting them in this way, the horsemen surrounded them and rode toward them as if to destroy them. They were already aiming their missiles as if about to throw them, and perhaps some of them did throw. Meanwhile the Phocians stood facing them, gathered together with their ranks closed as tightly as possible on every side. Then the horsemen turned and rode back. I cannot say for certain whether they had come to destroy the Phocians at the request of the Thessalians, and then, when they saw them turn to defend themselves, feared that they too might suffer some loss and so rode back because Mardonius had commanded them to do so, or whether, on the other hand, Mardonius wished to test the Phocians and see whether they had any warlike spirit. When the horsemen had ridden back, Mardonius sent a herald to speak to them. Be of good courage, Phocians, for you have proved yourselves good men, and not as I was informed. Now therefore continue in this way with zeal, for you will not surpass either myself or the king in benefits. So much happened concerning the Phocians. When the Lacedaemonians came to the isthmus, they encamped there. Hearing this, the rest of the Peloponnesians who favored the better cause, and some also because they saw the Spartans going out, thought it wrong to lag behind the Lacedaemonians in their march. So after the sacrifices at the isthmus proved favorable, they all marched together and came to Eleusis. They performed sacrifices there also, and when the signs were favorable they marched onward, with the Athenians joining them. The Athenians had crossed over from Salamis and met them at Eleusis. When they came to Erythrae in Boeotia, they learned that the barbarians were encamped on the Asopos, and when they perceived this, they drew themselves up opposite them on the lower slopes of Kitaron. Since the Hellenes did not come down into the plain, Mardonius sent all his cavalry against them. Their commander was Mecistios, called Macistios by the Hellenes, a man of reputation among the Persians. He had an Essay horse with a golden bridle and otherwise finely equipped. When the horsemen rode up to the Hellenes, they attacked them by squadrons, and in their attacks they did them great harm. Besides this, in contempt, they called them women. It happened by chance that the Megarians were posted in the part of the whole position that was easiest to attack and easiest for the cavalry to approach. As the cavalry pressed its attacks, the Megarians, being hard pressed, sent a herald to the commanders of the Hellenes. The herald reported that the Megarians said they were not able by themselves to endure the attacks of the Persian cavalry while holding the position where they had first been posted. Even so far, they said, they had held out against them only by endurance and courage, though they were under heavy pressure. Now, unless the allies sent others to take over their position after them, they should know that the Megarians would leave the place where they then stood. When the herald brought this report, Pausanias tested the Hellenes to see whether any others would voluntarily offer to go to that place and take position there in succession to the Megarians. When the rest were not eager to go, the Athenians undertook the task, and among the Athenians it was the 300 picked men whose captain was Olympidoros the son of Lampon. These men undertook the task, and were posted at Erythrae in front of the other Hellenes present, choosing to take the bowmen with them also. For some time they fought, and at last the fighting ended in this way. While the cavalry was attacking by squadrons, the horse of Mecistios, which had gone ahead of the rest, was struck in the side by an arrow. In pain it reared upright, and threw Mecistios off. When he had fallen, the Athenians immediately pressed upon him. They captured his horse, and they killed Mecistios himself as he resisted them, though at first they could not do so. His equipment was of this kind. Underneath he wore a cuirass of golden scales, and over the cuirass he had put on a crimson tunic. When they struck the cuirass they accomplished nothing, until someone perceived what was happening and thrust into his eye. Then at last he fell and died. Somehow the other cavalrymen did not see this happen. They neither saw him fall from his horse nor saw him being killed, and while they were making their retreat and turn, they did not notice what was taking place. But when they had stopped their horses, they immediately missed him, since there was no one to command them. When they realized what had happened, they passed the word to one another and all rode together, hoping if possible to recover the body. The Athenians, seeing that the cavalry were now riding to attack them no longer by squadrons but all together, shouted to the rest of the army to help them. While the whole body of infantry was coming to their aid, a fierce fight arose over the body. As long as the 300 were alone, they were much the weaker and were about to abandon the body. But when the mass of the army came to help them, the horsemen could no longer sustain the fight, nor did they succeed in recovering the body. Besides Mecistios, they lost others of their number as well. Then they withdrew about 2 furlongs away and deliberated about what they should do. Since they had no commander, they decided to ride back to Mardonius. When the cavalry arrived at the camp, the whole army, and Mardonius too, made great mourning for Mecistios. They cut off their own hair and the hair of their horses and baggage animals, and gave themselves up to unlimited lamentation. All Boeotia was filled with the sound of it, because the man who had perished was, after Mardonius, the one most honored among the Persians and by the king. The barbarians, then, paid honors in their own manner to the slain Mecistios. But the Hellenes, after they had withstood the attack of the cavalry, and having withstood it, driven them back, were much more encouraged. First they put the dead body in a cart and carried it along their ranks. The body was worth seeing for its size and beauty, and for this reason the men left their places in the ranks and went one after another to gaze at Mecistios. After this they resolved to come down farther toward Plataea, because the region of Plataea seemed much more convenient for them to encamp in than the region of Erythrae, both for other reasons and because it was better supplied with water. They decided that they must come to this region, and to the spring Gargaphia within it, and encamp in their separate posts. So they took up their arms, and went along the lower slopes of Kytyre and past Hyce into the Plataean land. When they arrived there, they posted themselves by their several nations near the spring Gargaphia and the sacred enclosure of the hero Androcrates, over low hills and level ground. Then, while the several positions in the army were being arranged, a strong dispute with much argument arose between the Tegeans and the Athenians. Each of them claimed the right to occupy the other wing of the army, and each brought forward deeds both recent and ancient in support of its claim. Tegeans spoke first. "We have always been judged worthy of this position by the whole body of allies in every common expedition the Peloponnesians have made before this, whether in ancient times or in recent ones, ever since the time when the sons of Heracles tried, after the death of Eurystheus, to return to the Peloponnese. We gained this honor at that time because of the following event. When we, together with the Achaeans and Ionians who were then in Peloponnesus, had come out to the isthmus to give help, and were encamped opposite those who wished to return, Hyllos is said to have made a speech. He said that it was not right for one army to risk its safety by fighting against the other. Instead, he urged that the man in the army of the Peloponnesians whom they judged to be the best among them should fight in single combat against him, under terms agreed upon between the two sides. The Peloponnesians then resolved that this should be done, and they swore an oath to one another on this condition. If Hyllos conquered the leader of the Peloponnesians, then the sons of Heracles should return to their father's inheritance. But if he were conquered, then on the other hand the sons of Heracles should depart, lead away their army, and not try to return to the Peloponnese for 100 years. Then, out of all the allies, Echemos the son of Oropos, the son of Phegeus, who was our commander and king, was selected after he himself volunteered. He fought the single combat and killed Hylos. Because of this deed we obtained among the Peloponnesians of that time, besides many other great privileges which we still possess, this privilege also, that whenever a common expedition is made, we always lead the other wing of the army. To you Lacedaemonians, we make no opposition. We leave you free to choose and allow you to command whichever wing you wish. But as for the other wing, we say that it belongs to us to lead it, as in former times. Apart from the deed that has just been related, we are more worthy than the Athenians to hold this post, for we have contended in many glorious contests against you Spartans, and in many also against others. Therefore it is just that we should have the other wing rather than the Athenians, for they have not accomplished deeds such as ours, either recent or ancient. Thus the Tegeans spoke, and the Athenians replied. Although we know that this gathering was assembled for battle with the barbarian, and not for speeches, yet since the Tegean has set before us the task of speaking about both ancient and recent matters, namely the worthy deeds that each of our two nations has accomplished in every age, it is necessary for us to point out to you why it belongs to us, who have always been brave men, as an inheritance, rather than to the Arcadians to hold the chief place. First, as for the sons of Herodotus, whose leader they say they killed at the Isthmus, in earlier times, when these men were driven away by all the Hellenes to whom they came as they fled from slavery under the men of Macmillan, we alone received them. By joining with them, we subdued the insolence of Eurystheus, after conquering in battle those who then lived in Peloponnesus. Again, when the Argives who marched with Polynices against Thebes had been slain and were lying unburied, we declare that we marched an army against the Cadmeans, recovered the dead bodies, and gave them burial in our own land at Eleusis. We have also another glorious deed, performed against the Amazons who once invaded the Attic land, coming from the river Thermodon. And in the labors of Troy we were inferior to no one. But there is no profit in mentioning these things. For on the one hand, though we were brave men in those times, we might now have become worthless, and on the other hand, even if we had then been worthless, we might now be better. Let this be enough, therefore, about ancient deeds. But even if no other deed had been displayed by us, though many have been, and glorious ones, not fewer than those of any other people of the Hellenes, still by the deed accomplished at Marathon alone we are worthy to have this privilege and others besides it. For we alone of all the Hellenes fought in single combat with the Persian, and having undertaken so great a deed, we overcame and conquered 46 nations. Are we not worthy then to have this post for that deed alone? However, since at a time like this it is not fitting to contend over position, we are ready, Lacedaemonians, to follow what you say, wherever you think it most convenient for us to stand and opposite whichever enemy you choose. Wherever we are posted, we shall try to be brave men. Give us your orders, therefore, and we shall obey. This was the answer the Athenians gave. Then the whole body of the Lacedaemonians shouted aloud that the Athenians were more worthy to occupy the wing than the Arcadians. In this way the Athenians obtained the wing and overcame the Tegeans.
And there we will pause, with the two armies drawn up and watching each other across the plain of Plataea, neither yet willing to be the first to cross. Next time, in part 49, the long, tense days of waiting, the cavalry skirmishes, the death of the splendid Mecisteus, and the slow strangling of the Greek army's water and supplies that will force a fatal night march. Mind the footnotes, and beware the folly.